Hello, I'm Luke Berends. This is my final project on world history. Medicine, very important in history, the livelihood of people, and preventing deaths. Medieval medicine was very primitive. Germs were not yet discovered. Herbs and spices were used, which isn't bad, but it's not up to date with what we have. And oftentimes very severe treatments were given out that we now know are unnecessary. There were no vaccines. The smallpox vaccine, which was a big deal, was invented by Edward Jenner in 1796. The Black Plague, a huge problem. In 1300s, wiped out nearly half of Europe's population. No one knew how to treat it properly. It came from fleas on rats, and it was highly contagious. Revolution also had a big, significant impact on history. People revolting when they have to deal with tyranny. The French Revolution was late 1700s, very violent, and I think the French were not prepared after they overthrew King Louis, and so there were many power changes and many groups trying to seize power, and I think it was only until Napoleon came along and set up a firm government that the French Revolution was actually worth it. The Russian Revolution was 1905-1917. Also very violent, Bolsheviks taking power, set up a communist regime, poor life conditions. This revolution was not to gain of the Russian people. They had it worse after than before. Now, the American Revolution is different, though. This inspired the French Revolution, and it was a war for independence, the colonies declaring independence from Great Britain. And they weren't overthrowing a whole country. It wasn't a whole change. They founded a new country, set up a new constitution, new government system, and that is shown how Washington stepped down from power after only 2 terms. Now, politics, very similar to revolution, different ways of governing, important on history. Now, communism, which as we saw, Russia became after they revolted, it focuses on equality. But I would say this equality is more represented as sameness. Each person is treated the same, given the same job, like different skills, and the individualism that you see in each person is ignored. Shared property, all by the government. Government has full power to corrupt and treat the people poorly. At first, communism sounds nice, like in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, where he writes about equality between men and women and for everybody. Which sounds great, but it's really not. It supports low work ethic. Everyone works towards the government, not for their own gain, and there's no freedom. Now, monarchy, king or queen, this has been around since the beginning of civilization, and it was the main system of government until recent times. Oftentimes, a monarchy will provoke rebellion if an evil king starts treating the people horribly. And that's why the freedoms given by the king and monarchy can work, but most of the time it does not. And that's where democracy comes in. It is very unique as it is run by the people. America is a democracy, but they're a representative democracy. We vote for someone who represents the people the best, and they make the decisions for us instead of the people having to make the decision every single time something is brought up. Democracy supports equal opportunity, supports work ethic. You work for your own gain, unlike communism. And democracy supports freedom. Empires. There were many great empires in ancient times, the greatest of which, I would argue, is the Roman Empire from 500 BC to 470 AD. And it was actually a republic all the way up until roughly 30 BC, and then it became an empire. It was run by emperors, and a lot of these emperors, like Caesar, had good intentions in mind when ruling. And so they set up this advanced infrastructure, advanced military, highly advanced economy and culture, and I think this is why they lasted so long and were so great. The Incans, however, were not. They were very primitive. Even though they came after the Romans, I think they were not as advanced. They had roads and bridges nowhere near as advanced as Romans. They had a class system. They did human sacrifice. And as we see in the Old Testament, God despises human sacrifice, which is why the Incans were cut short, I think, by God having a hand with the Spaniards conquering them in 1500s. Ultimately, I would say there are some great quotes about history. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It was George Santayana. History is who we are and why we are the way we are. David McCullough. These are some great inspirational quotes on history and why we should study it. In conclusion, all the events of the past lead to here. We study history to learn from our mistakes, and we can look for patterns in the past to avoid past failures that different countries and kingdoms made. We should look, when studying history, at what motivated a person's society or kingdom and what affected their decisions. And then we can look at our own life and see what motivates us and how does that affect our decisions. So we should apply what we see in the past and what we learn and apply it to our own life. Here's how some of these things all tie together. Medicine increased lifespan and made sickness a smaller problem today than in ancient times. Obviously, this is a big deal. Sickness has always been a problem since the fall of man, and we are getting better at treating lives, but we still are mortal. Religion impacts everyone in history, influencing their actions, and this impacts every government, every person, every influential person. It affects politics, revolution, reasoning to do anything. So religion is really at the center of history and the center of everyone. Everyone's worldview affects what they do. Politics, we can learn from that in the past. Different governing systems, how they work, which ones are corrupt, which ones aren't. And revolution shows that we can stand against evil governments and we can declare our own independence and set up a new regime, a better way of living. But ultimately, everything is made by God, and God has his hand in history and everything. The kingdom only lasts if a sinner is in Christ. Even though the Romans were so great, they couldn't last forever. God was not at the center. God was against the Incans and their human sacrifice and brought them down. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. Genesis 1:31. Thank you.